guidelines and offer technical support for the TID rollover program. The benefits of the STS Association's latest Edition 2 specifications include improved security for the utility's prepayment vending system and improved cryptographic keys, all of which ensures that STS remains a simple, trusted and secure prepayment solution for utilities worldwide.
We urge every municipality and utility to get rolling. The time is now. The STS Association is offering free meter compliance testing to assist stakeholders to ascertain if their meters are ready for the TID rollover. Please visit the dedicated TID rollover website at www.tidrollover.com for more information. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, and welcome back to day two. Many of you would have met me yesterday. My name is David Ashton. I'm the CEO of VUCA Group, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you at Enlit Africa and in a return for day two. Thank you for an excellent first day of great content, critical conversations, and valuable connections. A thank you to you, our bold and brave delegate audience. I had a number of people approach me yesterday and comment on my Connect experiment. Now, I'm not going to make you do it again this morning, but during the session yesterday, it triggered valuable connections. It was an icebreaker or a confidence builder, and I appreciate that it's not always easy to introduce yourself to somebody new. Some people have a natural flair for it, others find it quite difficult. But our aim as VUCA Group is to motivate those connections, to spark the conversation that creates opportunity. Be bold and be brave. It's in those connections that the magic really happens. Yesterday was a good day. Today we want to build on that. With your permission, I'd like to share a takeaway from yesterday. For me, the Eskom Fireside Chat was a very authentic and insightful conversation into the challenges and the focus of the exec board deal with that maybe not current to what we have our attention on in the world of Eskom, but what they have their attention on and the challenges they deal with. And it's not so often covered in the media. It was evident by the absolute silence in the room that you were all deeply engaged in the conversation, which, as conference organizers, was so wonderful to experience. My thanks to the speakers again and the chair, James McKay of the Energy Council of South Africa, for that excellent session. I actually later had the privilege of joining the Eskom team for dinner last night, and it was clear that their passion and commitment to do right at Eskom is so inspiring. There are divisions and projects happening at Eskom that we don't hear about. R&D, microgrids, grassroots skills development programs, power corridors, sustainability projects. It's really an insightful environment and very engaging, and I'm very happy to reaffirm Enlit Africa's and VUCA Group's commitment to support Eskom at this annual event, but also through further project initiatives throughout the year. So to today, day two, a few program highlights for you to note down. Keynote this morning, sponsored by Siemens, will be a discussion around unpacking Africa's just energy transition. At 1:30, we reconvene back here after refreshments. Then there'll be a Conlog product launch that will be hosted on the stage. That's shortly followed by the DMRE, represented by Minister Graydon Mantashe, who will present and host a Q&A regarding the department's budget presentation presented to government over these last 2 days. At 2 o'clock in room 1.6, Huawei will be presenting a portfolio of solutions to the industry for those that wish to participate. We have a full program of content, both in here as the main stage, but also in the hubs, which are located in the two bottom corners of the exhibition hall, plus also the strategic session, which is in the top left-hand corner of the exhibition hall. That's those sessions, and that content runs for the rest of the day. Don't forget that all sessions are CPD accredited by the SAIEE, and you can pick up your registration forms on the entry points of all sessions today. And then don't forget tonight, we talked about it yesterday, conferences are not only about learning and engagement, they're also about having fun. We're happy to invite you to the Enlit Africa Engage Party at the Cabo nightclub at the Harbour. That starts at 6 o'clock, and there will be shuttle buses leaving from the entrance of CTICC, opposite the Westin Hotel. So please do join us, come down, network with your industry colleagues, have some fun. There'll be drinks and food provided for all. So don't forget the full program and event information is available to you on our mobile site, which can be accessed on the QR code on the reverse of your badge or by the URL above the QR code. We would also value your input to help us develop this platform for the future. This is version 1.0, and it's a commitment to us moving forward in a more sustainable manner as an event organizer. If you use the chatbot, which you'll see on the mobile site, you can give us your feedback on your user experience, or perhaps share some ideas on the information that may be missing from your experience. If you could just type feedback : and then what your comments to us would be. Any information that we can receive from you will help us develop that platform for the future. And finally, back to this morning, I'm thrilled to introduce a colleague and a friend, Mr. Ian Banner. He's the founder of Go Green Africa. Some of you may know Ian as the man that delivered Formula E to the streets of Cape Town this February. And VUCA Group is a proud partner on a series of co-located activations to the race that echo and reinforce the principle and the narrative of the Formula E concept to drive towards net zero. The racing was electric, the project was challenging but massively rewarding, and from within the chaos, Go Green Africa was born. And to tell us more about this initiative, I welcome Mr. Ian Banner to the stage.
Thank you, David, and good morning, all. It's an honor to be here, and, well, firstly, to be in Cape Town. For those of you who have traveled here, welcome back. For those of you who live here, aren't we lucky? It's a magnificent city to live in. As David kindly said, I started with my partners a journey 3 years ago to bring Formula E to Cape Town. For those of you who don't know, Formula E is the electric version of Formula One. The cars are now faster than Formula One cars from 0 to 200 kilometers an hour. Most of the racing is done in that range. The racing is really exciting. These guys go hell to leather. They are wheel by wheel. They bash into each other. It's electric racing. The cars are, the whole series is the only sporting code in the world to be net zero, and that promotes sustainability at its very center. So it is a purpose-driven sport. Now, it's great to stage an international project like this in Africa, and to shine, because the mother city shone amazingly, and some people kindly described it as the best Formula E race ever, which was remarkable from very credible people. But I realized very quickly in looking at bringing the race here that it needed to be so much more than a race. It is an example of what can be done at a net zero sustainable level. How is it that you can have these sporting machines generating 350 kilowatts of power and racing at net zero? And it's all audited, etc. So looking at that made me realize we have to put purpose at the center of what we are doing. So we started by creating a series, as David said, of support programs, including Africa's Green Economy Summit. And if we go on, let's have a look at the next slide. We hosted, relative to Inlet, a small first year, 381 delegates participated. We had 77 speakers, but we had real quality. We had John Room, who was former head of climate change for the World Bank, who's now the head of South Asia for sustainable infrastructure. John helped us shape the program. We had 77 speakers and panelists. So it was an enormous success for year one. We also launched Formula Student Africa. That is led by Warwick University in the UK. If we're going to address e-mobility in this country, we've got to start with our manufacturing sector. It's 14% of the country's economy now. We better have young people developing all the skill sets required around e-mobility. We now have 9 local universities who next year will enter a race team. And that means setting up a team. Warwick gives the blueprint and support. It means having the data scientists and the engineers. It means having the marketing team. It means having the promotions team, the social media team. It's a business proposal, and we've got 9 universities and technicons on board. So that's a start of what I think will become an important initiative. That's one further element of what we staged. And then finally, we staged a festival called Electric to showcase to the public all things E. People don't all know what an electric car looks like and rides like. It's a different experience. I've had the privilege of driving one for 5 years. It's a magnificent experience. They don't know about the scooters and the one-wheelers and all the skateboards and the transportation that is driven by E. We had that on show. And David, help me, how many people came and participated? I know we had 651 rides, experiences, 12,500 people attended, and the race we were sold out with 25,000 people attending the race. And remember, a street circuit, you got to build the circuit, number one, you got to build every piece of infrastructure too. As we stand here, I can confirm that in year 2, we're going to do 40,000. That's how many people will be coming. I'm very excited. However, continuing with the purpose piece, it led us to say, hang on, we've got a powerful platform that we can celebrate this whole net zero activity annually. Let's do more than that. Let's create an organization which we've called Go Green Africa. And Go Green Africa, I say, is there partly to help us save ourselves from ourselves. And why do I say that? I love it when people say, Mother Nature or the environment is in trouble. She's not in trouble. She might be hurting. But when she's ready, one flick of her tail, she'll wipe us all out and go to sleep for 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, however long she chooses, to restore herself. And we, mankind, humankind, will be gone. So the activities we are talking about in Go Green is very much about preserving the human race. So what are we doing? We wish to accelerate the transition, starting in South Africa, but into Africa, into a green economy in a just and inclusive way, which is spoken about a lot these days. But the question is, how do we do that? And the answer is, we bring members, our partners, to join us and to undertake certain pledges, to decarbonize, to innovate, to educate, inspire, and empower, to collaborate, and to leverage influence, and to reach further in their green activities. And collaboration, folks, is what it's all about. There's no one solution to the challenges that are out there. It's very much about this group of people in the room and others coming together to make this difference. We've got a shared mission with our partners. Uber, Eskom are the starting partners, VUCA, Susnet. And I'm going to take one example of the kind of collaboration I'm referring to. Bottom right, you'll see the name Materials Nexus. I got a call from Cambridge University a year ago to introduce Dr. Jonathan Bean. Jonathan is a physicist who is at Trinity College, but he started a business, Reimagining Materials. He has developed an algorithm driven by AI, which computes at between 200 and 1,000 times the speed of traditional modeling. So if you think of an alloy, say 13 different components, how do you establish first and foremost net zero, tensile strength, weight, etc.? You plot through your modeling traditionally, and that can take anything up to 20 years sometimes. We all talk about green hydrogen. It's an exciting medium for the future, but I've spoken to Fleetwood Grobler specifically about Sasol. They run their Fischer-Tropsch reactors at Sasolburg, of which there are 8, using gray hydrogen. It costs between $1 and $2. Green hydrogen currently costs between $7 and $8. It is not economically sustainable. But apart from that, what people don't talk about is that when you split the atom and you separate the hydrogen from the oxygen, you need iridium as part of the process, the rare earth metal iridium. If we look at the green hydrogen that's spoken about, in the Northern Cape and in Namibia alone, we need 60,000 rugby fields of solar, which is potentially doable, but you need 40 times the iridium that's been identified to date in order to go through that separation process. So Jonathan has come on board, and with his materials, with his, machine learning partner at Oxford, they are busy right now reimagining green hydrogen with a view to having electrons sitting at the middle rather than iridium. Normally, it would take 20 years. The project is anticipated to take 18 months. Just imagine if we, as Go Green Africa, could have helped to bring about change that results in green hydrogen not costing $7 to $8, but costing $2 to $3, where suddenly a company like Sasol could run green hydrogen and immediately, in this country at least, become green, our second largest polluter in Africa. That is potentially what we call impact. That is what Go Green Africa is working on. So we're going to be, all of our participants, members that join with us, we have a workshop this afternoon to be very specific about how we're going to try and move this forward. But we welcome all of you corporations to come and join us in this journey, to collaborate and to come and hold your feet to the fire so that Go Green can help to check that you are fulfilling your commitments to going green. If Vietnam can generate 9.3 gigawatts of power in 1 year, the year being 2020, how is it that we have an unsurmountable power challenge? We do not. We can solve our problems, and we can do it in a much quicker period, in my opinion, than people are estimating. Henry Stanley Haskins, who was a famous stockbroker, the turn of the century, who loved to write letters, said that what lies before us and in front of us is irrelevant compared to what lies within us. And if we can access what lies within us, and we can bring that into this world, that is when miracles happen. And my challenge to all of you is to become green torchbearers and to show the world what's possible and to reach within and to release that power to collectively bring about a seismic change in energy in the continent of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Another wonderful speech and what I believe is a very important initiative and a program for the development of Africa. VUCA Group is a proud partner of Go Green Africa, and we're learning every day with regards to our sustainability journey and how we can create influence within that sphere as well. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Bertha Dlamini. She's the founder of the industry group Women in Power and Energy, to host and chair this morning's keynote session, sponsored by Siemens, and it's talking to the topic of unpacking Africa's just energy transition. So please, Bertha, will you join me?
Good morning, everyone. As I've been introduced, I'm the founding president of African Women in Energy and Power. We've got 12 chapters in 12 countries on the continent. I've also been given the pleasure to recap yesterday's discussions, and there are a few comments that have been made by keynote speakers that I would like to highlight without belaboring the detail of the presentations that they gave. Indeed, yesterday was an electrifying start to the conference, and you will be treated to even more today. Without energy, there can be no adequate healthcare, sanitation, education, economic growth, or job creation. Without these basic functions and services, the risk of social and political disruption increases significantly. Having safe, sustainable, and reliable energy on the continent is central to what it takes to be a healthy, caring, and peaceful society. James McKay, CEO of the Energy Council, had this to say yesterday. He said his wish is a national call to action to rapidly build, expand, and recover both our national pride, but also our national electricity asset base, both public and private. David Ashdown, I gave you a new surname just like that. He had this to say: change is happening and disruption is the accelerant to bring change faster. He said, truly on the continent, this is our Kodak moment. He said his wish for Africa is that we embrace the future and the solutions we create, and we are guided by an honest, authentic, and inclusive moral compass. We also received a presentation from General Electric that illustrated their expansive participation in the gas value chain and their expansive decarbonization program. The city of Cape Town demonstrated their programs to secure energy security for the province. And of course, Eskom promised us a different future with a performing utility. Ladies and gentlemen, with those recapping words, I welcome Mr. Abel Teller, who is the Director General of the Association of Power Utilities of Africa, to give a keynote address.
Thank you so much. Honorable Ministers, distinguished dear CEOs, representatives of governmental agencies, and African power utility leaders. I would like to, first of all, thank David and Voca Group for inviting us, APOA, to partner with this great event taking place here in Cape Town. Cape Town, in South Africa, the land of diversity. When we are talking about diversity, let's first look at Africa on another angle of view. Africa today is 90% of cobalt in the world reserve, is 90% of platinum, 50% of gold reserve, 35% of uranium, 70 tantalite, 30% of diamond. And also, I'm not talking about energy reserve. The resources of energy, hydropower, best solar radiation on the continent, abundant wind power located on the Mediterranean, Indian, and Atlantic side. And I will not shock anybody by talking about the 9.9 billion metric ton of coal. But despite this, what the situation today? Africa tomorrow is collective GDP of $3 trillion US dollar. Is combined consumer expenditure of 1.7 trillion US, and also the fastest growing population. We are talking about 2 billion people in Africa, and also half of this population living in city, and half of them young people. So what kind of transition to fit this development? How can we assess the readiness of our utility to face this transition? And there we talk about just transition. The coming investment will be shaped by demographic and climate. So with this, we should be prepared to give not only light to people. We are talking about lighting and powering the industry. If we don't power the industry, saying that giving enough power for transformation industry, we won't make it. The universal access we are talking about is people having light and transformation industry powered on the continent. To give job to the youth, I say half of the population, and having job, we create a medium class people to rule the continent. So let's just have another look on Africa, say that if Africa be part of the economic development of the world, that will start by energy. Energy, universal access, climate, and just transition for Africa. So with this, I'd just like to remember who we are. The African Power Utility Association is the only continental organization. APOA has been created in 1970. We headquartered in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. By the creation, we bear the name of Union of Transporter, Distributor, and Transporter and Distributor of Electric Energy of Africa, UPDA. After 40 years, in 2012, we changed name to become APOA. We have now 57 active member utility on the continent and 30 affiliate member in Africa, Europe, America, and Asia. And we are promoting on the continent governance of the system, of the power sector. Now we are heading after putting in place the power pool where does not exist in the beginning of this last century. I mean, Western African power pool, Central African power pool, and Eastern African power pool. We came with the forum of regional power pool, where we are heading now to promote the African single electricity market. How do we make this? By having a continental master plan of development of the networks. So that is our focus for the moment. Capacity building was our main concern by creation. We have had from 1978, the first high school of engineers where graduated engineers are ruling the system today. There are CEO of many utility ministers and head of energy department, the African Development Bank, World Bank, and even in Middle East. So today we came with the African Network Center of Excellence of Electricity, where we are promoting how we bridge the gap of knowledge to face this development, to face transition, and also new technology promotion within utility. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ella. Africa's just energy transition ambitions are being tested in the face of global recession, rising poverty, unemployment, and falling revenues. Analysts point out that in the continent, public revenue shortfalls are sizable, and the pace of economic reform is slow, and that 1 out of 5 countries do not raise enough revenues to meet their basic state functions. Access to electricity or access to clean, affordable energy remains low, and we have had many years, as far as 8 years ago, 600 million people on the continent do not have access to electricity. 900 million people on the continent do not have access to clean energy for cooking. And you can imagine how that compromises the dignity of families, women, and children, and takes away from their productive time. Mr. Carlos Fernandez Alvarez, the acting head of gas, coal, power at the International Energy Agency, had this to say: everyone is keeping their climate targets. But it's true that when you face the dilemma to keep the lights on or to decrease carbon emissions, the choice is to keep the lights on. The game is net zero. The game is not no generation capacity at all for countries. The African Union, African Common Position encourages striking a balance between ensuring access to electricity to catalyzing the much needed socio-economic growth in Africa and smoothly transitioning towards an energy system based on renewables and clean energy sources, matching the ambitions of Agenda 2023. They declared that Africa will continue to deploy all forms of its abundant energy resources, including renewable and non-renewable energy to address energy demand. Natural gas, green and low carbon hydrogen, nuclear energy will therefore be expected to play a crucial role in expanding modern energy access in the short to medium term, while enhancing the uptake of renewables in the long term for low carbon and climate resilient trajectory. Despite a global consensus on the need to transition to clean, sustainable energy, it is also true that countries must confront their realities. Some of the challenges facing global transition includes the following: the uncertain pace of technological development and deployment for various domestic markets, the return of energy security as a prime requirement for countries, the lack of consensus on how fast the transition should and can take place, in part because of its potential economic disruption. A sharpening divide between advanced and developing countries on priorities in the transition. Obstacles to expanding mining and building supply chains for the minerals needed for the net zero objective. South Africa came out of COP26 with the Just Energy Transition Partnership. We were all very excited about it. This was followed by the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, which maps out a 1.5 trillion investment plan for the next 5 years to assist the country's transition to a greener economy. And recently, as early as this past week, we have had a publication of some of the critics on the Just Energy Transition and the absence of very deliberate skills development and capacity development for the transition in the country. In Africa, other fossil fuel producing countries, including Nigeria, are contemplating the possibility of a Just Energy Transition Partnership to enable their transition. So the concept of Just Energy Transition Partnership has attracted significant global interest. The G7 group of countries has signaled the possibilities of negotiating similar partnerships with coal-reliant and emerging economies such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. Senegal and Mozambique are also considered for such a partnership as gas producers. As early as COP15, which took place in 2009, OECD countries committed to a collective goal of mobilizing $100 million, $1 billion, pardon me, per year by 2020 for climate action in developing countries, in the context of meaningful mitigation actions and transparency on implementation. The goal was formalized in COP16 and in COP21. And this just indicates that the promise to finance a just energy transition in developing countries has been ongoing. However, it is quite clear that that goal is not being met. And so as we see the staggering amounts being promised and the investment plans being presented, we have to ask how truly as a continent are we going to transition to a clean energy system. To explore these factors, I welcome my esteemed panel, Ms. Sabine Dal-Olmo, CEO, Siemens South Africa. Please come through. Mr. Abel Taylor, please come through again. He's the Director General, Association of Power Utilities of Africa, who's just spoken. Mr. Alex Wachira, Principal Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Energy in Kenya. And Mr. Albert Murungi, Head of ICT, Uganda Electricity Generation Company. Thank you so much. I'm going to start my question directed to Mr. Alex Wachira. And I just want you to share your thoughts, having explained the state of Africa's energy transition challenges. How can Africa achieve a tailored just energy transition and attract the necessary investment?
Thank you, Dlamini, for the question. And I want to first of all thank VUCA Group, Siemens, for inviting me to Enlit Africa. And indeed, today is my first time to be in, yesterday was my first time to be in Cape Town. I've read about Cape Town, I've heard about it, but I've never been here. So I'm glad to be here. Let me start by saying that for energy transition, Africa, it is us to do it for ourselves. Of course, we have a lot of challenges in terms of transition. First of all, one of our main challenges is attracting investments, but we cannot keep complaining. It's about time that us as Africa, we get our hands dirty and work towards working towards the transition from fossil fuel to clean energy. In Kenya, we are currently generating about 92% of our energy through renewable energy, mainly through the hydropower. Kenya, we are blessed with having geothermal. And we also have wind power, which is we have about 410 24 megawatts hours of megawatts capacity of wind energy. And we also do have solar energy. If you look at Africa's potential in terms of solar energy, in terms of hydro energy, we have about 350 gigawatts potential of hydropower. And so therefore, if Africa, we attract the right investment, if Africa, we work together towards ensuring that we develop the 350 gigawatts of hydropower, and we actionalize what we call the Africa market, Africa energy market through modernization and creation of the African power pools, namely the West African power pool, the North African power pool, the East African power pool of about 11 countries, and the 12 African countries that make up the South African power pool. If we develop the regional interconnectors of those regional power pools, then we should be able to capitalize on each other's potential. Namely, that is the 350 gigawatts of hydropower. We have about 15 gigawatts of geothermal. We have 10 terawatts of solar power, and we also have about 150 gigawatts of wind power as Africa. And let me use Morocco for example, and I'll also use Kenya as an example. Morocco currently is developing about 10,000 megawatts solar plant, and it is also doing about 3,800 kilometers of LVDC power. And the vision of Morocco is to sell that power to Europe, that is Spain, all the way to UK. There is no reason why Africa, we should not be able to do the same, put up such kind of infrastructure and sell power to each and everyone. Kenya, for example, we have a regional interconnector with Ethiopia, and currently Kenya, we are consuming about 200 megawatts hours of power, hydropower, from the Grand Renaissance Dam that is built in middle of Ethiopia from the Blue Nile. And we are consuming 200 megawatts from Ethiopia of hydropower. And we have built 1,100 regional interconnector with Ethiopia using LVDC, high voltage, HVDC, high voltage direct to reduce the transmission. So therefore, we just need to embrace technology as Africa. We talk to each other, we listen to each other, we attract investment as Africa, and together forge forward. We need no longer complain. It is about time now that our leadership, we get together and work together towards achieving the clean transition. And I believe from where I sit that is indeed possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Your emphasis is harnessing collaboration across the continent in order for us to transition. Ms. Sabina, what is the role of technology companies in Africa's just energy transition? Not just from a technology deployment perspective, but also how to partner with the greater community, as Mr. Alex has just shared.
Well, thank you, Berta, and welcome everybody. Pleased to be here. Yeah, look at the technology first of all. If you look at the set out of Africa, and Ian was talking to it a little bit on how Africa can transition. But when we really look at the energy transition on the African continent, technology will be fundamental in order to make that happen. Because when we go back to another industry, the telecommunication industry, the African economies leapfrogged into a new technology. Today, everybody has a mobile phone, everybody has a smartphone, even if they have only little access to electricity, right? So we have solutions developed on the African continent, which the developed economies have not been able to think about because their, solution thinking was limited because technology was provided. When we look again at the resources on the African continent, and Alex mentioned it just now with regards to Kenya, where you have, I think, more than 92% of renewable energy, you will have various sources and multi-directional feed-ins coming into the network. Ian spoke about e-mobility. Yeah? This is one consumer which we currently don't have. But with a change in the automotive industry, it will be that in 10 years also in Africa, you will need to think about e-cars, if you like it or not, because legislation in the markets where we sell to and where we get our used cars from are going to change. So we will need to prepare the network for these kind of technologies, but also when you embed renewable energy, which is currently in the total value chain, the cheapest way to produce electricity with the lowest side effects to the environment in producing panels as well as wind turbines and the likes. And you will have fluctuating electricity capacity coming into the grid, making it very difficult to stabilize and ensure that you don't have blackouts in the grid. And here, only technology, digital technology, connecting these kind of microgrids together into a kind of a virtual power plant, protecting your assets through automation, which companies offer in that field, and Siemens is one of them, are the leading technology to help to shape what we call the grid edge going forward, as well as having, companies and private people feeding back into the grid excess they might produce out of their own resources. When we look at the commitment of companies, and here Siemens, we are very proud. We have a number of projects where we also help to enable communities to participate in the energy transition. We have one here together with the German Development Agency, GIZ, in Upper Blinkwater. Is a little farming community here in the Eastern Cape where we have assisted them with the backup power solution for the irrigation pump to help them in order to run a little microgrid to ensure that water is always given to the crops for them to be economic active and feed their society. But I want to highlight one part which is very close to my heart, and we at Siemens talk about it a lot, and I had the pleasure a week ago to travel with the German chancellor to Kenya and look at their transition. And one of the areas which we as Siemens, but also as the German industry are very keen of, is on skills development, because one part where a partnership on the African continent has to happen is on skills development. We need to be able on the continent to help ourselves in making that transition reality. And Berta, we are supporting the training specifically also on women-led companies, but medium and smaller enterprises, which are close to where the assets are being installed, be it the solar farms and other assets, because it's not anymore this big power plant where where to go. You will have these distributed systems which need to be maintained, and we need to have the skills in the region where the assets are installed. And for us, this is one of the vital areas, and we have committed ourselves to the partnership, not only with the respective governments, but also to identify how we can have this knowledge transfer between Germany in that case and the African countries making reality.
Thank you so much. Indeed, Africa is set to leapfrog from no energy to a diversified energy environment. In fact, distributed energy sources are said to be the next feature of our energy system. You spoke about preparing the network for this diversifications and ensuring that we've got the skilled pool of resources to participate in this transition. Mr. Abel, just listening to Ms. Sabina speak about the necessity to prepare networks for this diversification as Africa is rapidly diversifying from its monolithic energy system, how are your members participating or playing a role in the continent's transition?
Thank you, Dalbini. In fact, the development of Africa should be always think on regional base. There are so many inside small country that a power system cannot be viable when you take a country as alone. There, the idea of developing the power pool, which are the regional development of network and also regional market. So there, when it's come of least cost planning, sometimes you may find out that the least cost source is not in your country, but the neighboring country. And to tap into this energy help to reduce costs and give power to people. So what is going on the continent is we may prepare the grid before we have reliable green energy on the grid. If the grid is not prepared, renewable energy integration can bring to collapsing the network. So first, to prepare the network, to take a good programming of the renewable energy, how to integrate to the network, and how we are reaching the population. Because in many countries, we don't have a very concentrated people. So African Union came out of using all available sources where it is at the best cost. So where you are having in concentrate big city, your network with all, kind of sources, you should plan how you reach the isolated population to give electricity to those people. So the Power Authority are now thinking on developing the national network, but in the context of the regional power pool, and in the same time, integration between power pool. Let's talk about the line from Ethiopia to Kenya, but this line is ZTK, should be joining Zambia. And therefore, you are talking about inter power pool connection, the same as Ethiopia, Sudan connecting to Egypt. So the development of network is regional business being programmed nationally, and with the focus of African integration. There only we can stabilize the system and have prepared it to the transition we are talking about.
Sure. As you speak about regional integration and inter-power pool integration, I know there are a lot of people in the audience, investors, corporates, and entrepreneurs that would like to participate as value-adding suppliers and service providers and investors. These projects that are coming out of this integration, where can we access information on this progress?
The information are available, and what we did lastly, just in February, we launched, APOA, our new website in French, English, Portuguese, Arabic, and we have a window to give information on investment. Other sources are the job that we are doing with the African Union Development Agency, where you please remember that some years ago we developed at level of African Union the PIDA program, the program of investment development, the infrastructure development of Africa, where we incorporated all projects from country level to regional level and African level. But pay attention on one thing. Many years ago, we had been targeting domestic use as primary customer. That cannot bring to the development of a good system. We should target industrial use, transformation industry, because if we don't have credit-worthy customer, you cannot develop a system. Domestic use come after, because we should stop the vicious circle that Africa is a mine giant and energy poor. If you want Africa to be developed, you target industrial load, transformation industry, like first customer, and credit-worthy customer before you come to domestic. There we can stabilize the grid and have a very a good path of development of the network.
Fantastic. Mr. Abel, as Mr. Albert. As Mr. Abel has just explained the necessity to develop the network to ensure that as we integrate renewable sources, we've got a strong, resilient network to hold the capacity. Won't you please share with us your thoughts on the modernization of utilities and the digitization of utilities in this just energy transition?
Thank you, Dlamini, and greetings to everyone in the audience. When we speak of information and communication technologies in the energy sector, most of us, the first thing that comes to our minds is digitalization. And you'll agree with me, especially from a utility perspective, you're looking at efficiency and safety. Now, there are two sides to IT in energy. The first, of course, is the energy that is required to power the IT systems, the IT and communication systems. And then, of course, the other side is IT in the energy systems. I'll focus more on IT in energy systems, where IT then comes into play a very critical role in ensuring that we're able to deliver cost-effective, reliable power for our different localities. Now, some of the key things in there, of course, is harnessing the different technologies that are out in the market to date to ensure that we can be able to do our tariffing accurately. Past speakers have spoken of energy trading, but to be able to effectively do this energy trading, you need to harness again the modernizations in the information and communication technology spaces. If you're talking about grid planning, if you're talking about cybersecurity, which is also very key because most of the utilities we run are considered critical national infrastructure in most of our countries. So how do you ensure that you protect them against cyber attacks? So it's really a point in time where I think advancements in technology are playing a very significant role, not only in ensuring energy security, affordability and availability, but also its reliability through the different information and communication technologies that are coming in to support this space. Yep.
It's a beautiful segue to what I would like Ms. Sabina to talk about. You've given broad strokes on technology that is available to enable utilities to modernize, to digitize, and to protect their assets. Ms. Sabina, I would like to give you an opportunity to truly share with us in that space what Siemens is doing to enable utilities to modernize their assets.
Yeah, look, I mean, from one part, first of all, it starts also with a training and education again in the utilities to get the awareness of what is really out there, because technology is vastly moving forward, and with the current cybersecurity aspects, you also need to consider you need to really be kept up to date. So specifically helping utilities, and it's a call to all of you here in the room which are at the utility space, you're more than welcome to reach out to us, because we do training session in a closed shop with your utility or in a wider area on areas of interest for you, really looking at, you know, how you can protect your grid, how you can protect your assets. Where we particularly come in and specifically is in the protection of the substations, to make sure, you know, you will see that when you live in South Africa with the blackout, some of the substations don't come back when the power comes back, because that also means that some of the technology is not properly working. And here this is one of our strongholds within Siemens, where we have ample of opportunities to showcase to you in the country and on the continent. Now, we did quite a nice job as well with the Canyon on the substation for your interconnector. So if you want to have a reference on that one, you might speak to Alex. But more important is when we look at assets and these different energy sources as a source, but also the different consumers coming into the network behaving differently than we are seeing it right now. That requires significant investment into the SCADA, into national control centers or regional control centers, which then are linked together. And that's all done on a digital base, on our software version, which we provide to the utilities. And lastly, one more important part in the African context is how to also manage your system with regards to revenue collection, the metadata management set out, because at the end of the day, you want to provide electricity, but you also want to get paid for it. And you want to see who is consuming what, so that you can manage your load and as well your energy you provide, and who is feeding in, because eventually you will have, like you have in Europe, prosumers, people who want to have money when they give you excess electricity, and that you all need to reflect in your network and in your billing system. And here, I mean, the whole system is going digital, having your meter as a digital meter in your, as a smart meter, we call it, in your house or in your industrial application. This is where we see significant potential. And from a cybersecurity point of view, you will know this is one of the most crucial aspects. And I just want to give you one idea, because everybody thinks when you talk about digital, it goes all up in the cloud and it's accessible for everybody. The way on how we work at Siemens is we try to have for you, or if depending on what the customer would like to see, we have defined clouds which are only accessible for that particular company, so that you also can, through cybersecurity, ensure that nobody is, infringing with your system and boycotting your assets overall. Because currently, when we look at the African market overall, there is very limited rollout on smart technology, specifically in the energy field. And, you also can apply it for water. It's not limited to electricity only.
Yeah. I was reflecting just now on what Mr. Abel said around focusing on industrial load, if you are going to ensure that you can secure a reliable supply with a resilient grid. And we know that analysts have determined that Africa will not make the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, universal access to clean, affordable energy by 2030. So I want to pose a challenge to you, Mr. Abel. As we focus on the industrial load and we prepare the grid to ensure that it can contain the renewable energy sources that we bring on, what are we doing on the continent to fast-track universal access to electricity?
Thank you again. Is the use of all sources only can bring us to the universal access. When I came back to intermittency, when Alex talked about Moroccan case, we are talking about CSP. And the sun that we have, it is not only for photovoltaics. When we focus a large grid, we need to choose the best solution to meet this universal access target. So what our members are doing is sometimes, instead of storage, using interconnection to back the intermittency. And when it's come now to go to the last miles, there we can come with local technology, with photovoltaic and all other sources that we know that the remote people are part of the universal access we are talking about. But the powerful development also help us to integrate quicker the renewable energy. And for Africa, one source of energy that we are not talking enough about will be the source for the 20 or 30 coming years is gas. Gas for us is very important for the transition. So with gas, because we have abundant gas in Africa, that can help us to fast-track the universal access. Of course, we cannot talk about nuclear power, but instead, when you take a country like Egypt, its stock capacity today, 58,000 megawatt, reserve margin 10,000 megawatt, and the first nuclear unit, 2028, 1,200 megawatt of by Rosatom. That means that we need all sources to be able to meet the target of universal access. We should not left behind any kind of solution and technology. Meaning that with this, we can be able to meet the 2030 target is not doable, but don't forget that Africa will surprise by another leapfrogging. The leapfrogging we talk about in communication is happening in electricity as well. So the last miles are being taken care of, and now we have many players. The mini grids and the distributed generation are on board also to be part of the target of universal access. So power utility are now with all other partners are on the field. And we take this also into account.
Mr. Bin, I'm going to come back to you on mini grids on the continent. I just want to go to Mr. Alex. If you can just share with us from a Kenyan perspective how electrification is progressing and your view in terms of the country's ability to meet the goal in 2030.
Thank you once again, Dlamini, for that question. Let me start by saying, giving the African context, of the 733 million people who do not have access to electricity, 589 million of them live in the continent of Africa. And that is 80% of those who do not have access to electricity are domiciled in Africa. And of the 80%, 75% of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. In the Kenyan context, we have, from 2016 up to now, 2016 we had 41.9% of Kenyans who had access to electricity. As we speak today, we have moved the numbers up to 78%. And this has been through deliberate government efforts towards ensuring that you fund what we call the last mile. And I want to thank and say that we have also had help from World Bank in a program that we call Kenya Off-Grid Solar Acceleration Program, whereby we are developing mini grids in those centers and those areas where we are not able to put the main grid up to where they are. And this is the reason, this is mostly because in some areas of Kenya, we have areas that people are sparsely populated. And so therefore, it is very much expensive to build the grid up to where people are. And what we have done now is we're in the process of actually bidding the bids for the contractors who will be able to build the mini grids. About 143 mini grids in 14 counties of what we call arid and semi-arid areas of Kenya will be up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so therefore, it's an opportunity for investors to come in and bid and see if they can be able to put up those mini grids. They will have both solar solar that is battery backed, to ensure that the communities that the areas will be, the communities can be able to access electricity 24 hours, 7 days a week. Let me mention something in regard to the regional interconnector. We are about 98% done in completing a transmission line from a town we call Isinya to Namanga. Namanga is a town that borders Kenya and Tanzania. And once we complete that, it means that the East African power pool, you can push power from Ethiopia down to Kenya and to Tanzania. And now Tanzania is connected to the South African power pool. So that means that the power, even in the event that we have excess power in Kenya and actually the Eastern African side, then we can't be able to push power all the way to where we are seated today, that is in Cape Town. That is through the regional interconnector. Of course, we have the oldest regional interconnector that is between us and our neighbors, Uganda. But we are also trying to put up a stronger transmission line, 400 kV, to ensure that we can also be able to put power in and out of Uganda, and actually now get to Rwanda and to Eastern Congo. And let me mention, when we are in the Eastern Congo, I'm one of the persons who believes that Grand Inga will one day be a reality. Because once we have power in Grand Inga on its own is able to give us 140 gigawatts of energy. That is energy that is enough to power East and Southern Africa. So when I sit here and say that the African solution is in our hands, if we get it right with Grand Inga and Africa, we collaborate to get Grand Inga up in arm, then we should be able to have the issues of power reliability and power stability gone, because we'll have adequate power that we can actually be able to sustain our energy needs. Let me end by mentioning that we are having one of the lowest per capita consumption of electricity in Africa. It is something that we need to work on. If you compare ourselves with what is happening in Europe, what is happening in America, you will see that we are consuming probably less than a third of the world's per capita consumption. So Kenya, we are in the process of accelerating universal access to electricity through last mile. And let me end by mentioning something towards clean cooking. Because Africa, we are still lagging behind in terms of clean cooking. We are still using biowood. And in Kenya, we are having a transition towards ensuring that we access clean cooking by the year 2028. And that is use of biogas and e-cooking. So if we are able to embrace those, then as a continent, then we should be able to have universal access to electricity and universal access to clean cooking. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those contributions. We've had contributions cutting across the different elements of our energy systems. Our panelists have addressed the macro developmental advances from a technology perspective. We have heard from how the network is being prepared to contain intermittent sources of energy. We've heard from Siemens, their contribution to skills development, ensuring that utilities are able to participate in this transition efficiently. We've also heard how microgrids are becoming a feature of Africa's just energy transition. Most importantly, the call that Africa must do it for itself. As I come to a close of our discussions, I just want to give our panelists an opportunity to speak on the just element of the transition. I think we've spoken about the technology, we've spoken about the need to transition, but we haven't quite highlighted how we're going to make this transition inclusive. And I'm going to start with you, sir, your concluding remarks on how Africa can make the transition just.
Thank you. I think when we talk about the just energy transition, it's not simply an event, but I think it's a process. And I think as a continent, that is endowed with so much resources, and of which some of these resources are actually hold a lot of potential for energy generation. As we speak of this just transition, first of all, we need to be in position to address the present challenges, today's challenges. Whether we're using fossil fuels at present, we should first of all be able to power our present demands, and then gradually start embarking on the transition into the more renewable sources. It's not something that is going to happen in one day, but I think with concerted efforts collaboratively, we can eventually start progressing into the more renewable energy sources by applying optimal energy mixes in our generation facilities. And eventually, I think we should be able to hit the targets for SDG 7 for access and affordable electricity for all our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Thank
Your
you.
concluding remarks around how we can make our transition just.
Thank you, Dlamini. Let me start, first of all, by welcoming, before I forget, with your permission, moderator of the session. Kenya will be hosting the Africa Energy Forum and the Youth Energy Summit in June from 20th to 24th. I wish to welcome each and every one of you who is here and the entire Africa, power utilities and everyone who is interested in energy to that forum. Again, in the regard to climate change, His Excellency the President, William Samoei Ruto, will be hosting the Africa Climate Forum that will be a build-up to the COP28. That will happen from the 6th to the 10th of September this year, again in Nairobi. I wish to welcome you, realizing that we are just from COP27 where Africa made some progress in regard to getting some funds, about 100 billion of funds towards the countries that are seriously affected by climate change. And also the 100 hectares of land that we agreed as Africa to restore forest, and Kenya is leading in terms of having 15 billion target of planting of trees. So I want to welcome you to Kenya on those two occasions. Last but not least, I want to say, Dlamini, that through our own concerted efforts as Africa, we should be able to give the Africans, our people, clean access to clean cooking and access to universal access to electricity through concerted effort and getting financing towards accelerating last mile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sabine?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big story. How can Africa make more just? Because when we look at Africa, there are obviously countries which are currently participating in the economy very much in coal, gas, and oil, and they will have a significant impact on a negative side, potentially from energy transition. But for me, the first point is providing access to electricity to everybody, to the 600 million on the continent who don't have access, to the women which can't cook with clean sources. This is for me the first point of making it just, because as currently it was mentioned by Alex, they use wood and chips to make fire. That means we deforestate more, and we have an even bigger impact on the climate, because climate change doesn't know border. They don't know that Africa doesn't use less, so it doesn't really make a difference to the impact the continent is going to experience out of climate change. So, and it's much better to sustain biodiverse environments than to plant new trees, because it takes 20-30 years to get the same impact for the climate out of it. But when we look at the just transition in general, there are a lot of discussions around hydrogen. A lot of countries which are currently not producers of some kind of a resource used for energy are seeing hydrogen as the next maybe bankable produce, they can export to Europe. But, you know, Ian made that very clear. Hydrogen is not a cheap solution, and it can only be used for very dedicated industries. It's not a fit for all, because otherwise oil prices will be more expensive, and that means for Africa we can afford less because we import so much. So I think hydrogen is a good answer, but it will be in some countries and not in all countries, and we need to be clear of it. And where we have all this abundant renewable energy, the most cost-efficient way is to use the energy for production at that point where it's generated. So therefore, I do see when we look at just, it's also how we can industrialize through the green transition the African continent. And why do I say that? Because electricity, for instance, in Germany becomes so expensive that some of the industries are thinking to offshore some of the work, potentially also onto the African continent. Because at this point in time, there is a true reassessment of the logistic value chain, which is far too cheap. And it will be much more beneficial for the overall CO2 impact to have products produced where the resources are. Abel mentioned all the resources we have on the African continent. We have the people, we have the young population, and we have the energy. So there are a lot of factors for Africa. We need to get our commitment going from a governmental point of view, that we give stability, because that is what business wants. And then I do believe that there will be a lot of job creation, which will offset the negative impact out of changing from fossil fuels to renewable energy.
Thank you for those closing remarks, Mr. Abel. Up to you.
Yes, I feel that when we talk about transition, we never should forget that Africa have 55 countries. Every country has its specificity, even being Africa. So if the transition we are talking about should be just, we should take in account the specificity of each country where we are having a global policy. The power utility of the future is also in utility customer-oriented. Yesterday, the power utility used to give to the customer what they think that just for the customer, but tomorrow is what the customer wants that power utility should afford to give to them. So talking about also transition, we should not forget all, today we are talking about 5D. So not only decarbonization, just in some country when you have hybridization of a diesel plant with solar, or hybridization of a dam with solar, you reduce the carbon footprint and you give electricity at least cost than you have before. So we should focus country by country when we are having a global journey to this transition. If we did take care about specificity, we'll let some country behind, because Northern Africa has universal access where you have another country struggling with 12 or 15%. So that is the inclusiveness of the transition only will be just when we take care about all our 55 countries.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for those concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a round of applause. Very diverse views on Africa's just energy transition. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. We're going to break for refreshments. And after this, there are different stages that you can still attend. We've got the main stage, the strategic stage. We've got the renewable energy and storage hub. We've got the generation, transmission and distribution and water hub, the municipal forum, and we have a networking dinner that's coming later on. Thank you so much for joining us. I will release our panel.
And that's a wrap of day one at Inlet Africa 2023. We started the morning off with a phenomenal opening act as we led into a welcome address from our CEO of the VUCA Group, Mr. David Ashdown, followed by an insightful keynote address understanding Eskom's role in the new energy landscape and more. All I can say is that the main stage was jam-packed, filled with industry experts and thought leaders, ready to unpack the multi-sectoral, multi-dimensional energy transition. Let's not forget the buzz on our solution-focused expo floor as attendees got to experience the latest in technology and innovation, while having the opportunity to learn more around the green economy and ecosystem at the Green Hub. The energy today was more than electrifying, and I cannot wait to see what tomorrow holds as we continue on our journey to becoming Inlet.